What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing an air shaft change on the rockshox yari, where we'll be reducing the travel from 180mm down to 160mm. So here's some of the things you're going to need to get started. So obviously you're going to need your new air shaft, which is this is the 160mm air shaft. Your oil for the lower legs, the lubricant in the lower legs. I just use the recommended oil weight for this particular yari is 0W30. I just use motor oil. I don't find that it's made any sort of a difference in terms of servicing and stuff like that. I've got a 5mm to take the nuts off of the lower leg. I have a small pick. That's if you need to take out of your your foam rings on the inside. That also helps. I've got a valve removal tool. Now I'm a little bit pedantic when it comes to dismantling forks. I'll normally release all the air out of the fork and also remove the Schrader valve out of the actual air cap as well. Then obviously you know for 100% sure that there's no air traps in there. A set of circlip pliers. This will be used to take out the retaining ring on the bottom of the air spring. It's a little bit of a dodgy one, but again it works. A shock pump obviously to get your fork back up to pressure again. Shrimp butter, you can use some other lubricants as well, like slick honey. I use shrimp butter in most of my things. It's just a lot easier to use. Then I've got a couple of crash washers, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, oh sorry, this is probably the most important thing. Now when you dismantle the lower legs on your forks, you are going to need a bucket to catch the oil left in there. Okay guys, so basically what we want to do is that we've got our bike in the stand. We want to remove the lower legs from the uppers on the fork. So before we're able to do that, we need to make sure that all the air is out of the fork. So we're going to remove the top cap first. Take the top cap out. And then what I normally do is just use an Allen key or something like that, and then just press it, the valve on there, and you can hear the air come out there. Now I do an extra precautionary measure on the forks when I'm working on them. I'll use a valve removal tool similar to the one that you get on a car, and just remove the valve out of the actual top cap there. Now it's not essential to do that. I just do it as an extra safety precaution. So I've got that out there. I know that there's no air inside that air chamber there. Obviously just make sure that we don't lose that, because obviously we need to put that back in there when we are replacing or filling the air up again. Okay, cool. So now that we're going to remove the lower legs, firstly, I don't have a clip inside here where my brake lever, where my brake hose is on. So you need to undo that. And then what you need to do is you need to remove the brake from the actual lower leg. So I think this is a little Allen key. Let's put it in there. So undo the bolts there. Here. Cool. So we'll just put that aside. Now your brake's going to hang from the hose, which isn't an ideal situation. Normally what I'll do is I've got Velcro straps which I normally strap it on there, but for now I'm just going to put it on this side of the bicycle over here. So that's out of our way. Okay, we'll leave it like that. Okay, cool. So now we've got our forks will potentially be free. So what we need to do now is we need to take the separate the uppers and the lowers. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to use either an Allen key, you can use a socket as well. It just depends on what you have available. I think at the bottom of this they are 5mm Allen key bolts, which loosens the bolt from the upper. So we're going to stick that in the bottom there and just crack it. You can hear it sort of crack open there. And then on the damper side you'll have a little cap on there. Now some of them have grub bolts on there. So if you see here, my one is a 2016 Yari, so it doesn't have a grub bolt on there. This just basically pops off and it just comes out like that. If just before you pull it out or try and yank it out, just check, sometimes there are little grub bolts on the side there that need to be loosened before that pops out. Cool. So now we've got that out, we are going to stick our 5mm in there. We're going to crack that as well, and that just pops open. Now, before you fully unscrew these, the important thing is, I'm going to get the bucket. My wife is going to kill me if I get oil on the floor. So we're going to open those up and basically turn those until they're almost fully out. Now, at this point, if you try and take the lower legs off, they won't actually pop off. So we take the bolt out. If you take the bolts out there, your lower legs aren't going to actually come off. So I'm just taking that off and I'm just showing you an example of what's going to happen. You can't pop the lower legs off. They're still stuck quite firmly on there. So what I normally do is I'll take my bolt, not the rebound adjusting bolt, but I'll use the bolt from the air spring, screw it in there 1.5 turns, and then either with a mallet, your lower leg should slide off. You saw some of the oil come out of it now. And it basically pops off like that. So this is a good time now to give your fork a service. This fork was serviced quite recently. It's just been sitting around for a while. So if you have a look inside here, you've got 2 foam rings, which you normally replace on your service intervals on there. You can see those pop out. So I'm going to actually take those out for you so you can see. So there's one of the foam rings, and I'll take the other foam ring out on the other side. And then what you want to do is get some shop towel and clean the actual lowers out of the fork with some isopropyl alcohol or disc brake cleaner, and just get those nice and clean. So all the dirt and debris that's come into your forks, that's been introduced into your forks when you've been riding, all comes out of there. And then obviously, whilst we're looking at it as well, these are your wiper seals on your fork. Make sure that they're not damaged and that they're also intact on there as well. Cool. I'm actually going to put the lower legs over here, out of the way. Now, we obviously need to inspect our fork and make sure that these are in good condition. As you can see, like, I'm quite good at servicing my forks, so they're actually in pretty good nick. I do service them at the regular intervals of when they should be, which is, I think they're about 50 hours of riding. So if we have a look here, we've got the damper side, which is, this is your damper for your fork, and this is your air spring. Okay. Now, what we need to do now is, if we have a look at the fork from underneath, I'm going to actually rotate the bike in the stand and you can have a look and see what's going on. Cool. So this is where we are going to need our circular pliers. Now if you have a look here, there's a retaining spring, a circlip spring underneath the air spring, or just above the air spring seal head, that needs to be removed before we can actually pull the air spring out. Now that spring actually just keeps the air spring from puffing out under obviously full compression, or full extension should I rather say. So what we're going to do is, we obviously need to be quite gentle with this. Stick our circuit pliers inside there. Don't know if you can see on the video here. See if we can get a closer shot on there. So there's the circuit plier or circlip. Get our 2 points in there. So once your circlip's up, I have a bit of difficulty with that. That should release your air spring. So now, what you want to do with your air spring now, I'm going to lower this down again, so it's more in that sort of position. You want to grab your air spring, push it in, and just give a nice hard yank on it, and it will pop the retainer of the air spring up. So that's basically what you're trying to loosen with that on there. So you go down, up, and just a hard tug, and you'll hear it pop. And there we have your old air spring out of your fork. Now, similarly, at this point, I would clean the inside of your stanchion using isopropyl alcohol and a wipe, but like I said, I've done this quite recently, so I don't think I'm going to need to do it. So what we want to do is, you can see when you've got your different air shaft, obviously just compare them. Most of the time your suppliers will send you the right size air shaft, but this is something to look at. If you have a look at the 160mm air spring and the 180mm air spring, you can actually see the shaft length is different on there. If your shaft lengths are the same, then obviously you're putting the same air shaft back in there. Now these are the debonair air springs. You do get the upgraded version of them, the C1s, which have a larger negative air spring, which is cross compatible with most of the rockshox forks, especially with the Yari or the 35mm chassis platform. Okay, so let's not get them mixed up. I'm going to put our 180mm air spring out of the way over there. And before we obviously put our new air spring in, take my gloves off. We are going to use some of the shroud butter. Now, I don't like to put too much of this on there. What I find with a lot of rockshox products, even Fox, which I've serviced the Fox fork already, they over grease all of their components inside there, and what it does is it can affect your negative and positive air balance of your air chamber inside there, which will make it feel a bit harsh. And that's what I normally tell people to do when they get a new fork fresh out of the box. Strip the fork down. This is an easy way to do it, obviously. Strip the fork down, take all these parts off, and wipe the excess grease out of your forks. You don't need all that grease in there. So literally what I've got on my finger here, I'm just going to put that on the piston seal ring on there, just a little bit, so it's not an excessive amount on there. And also another thing, when you get a brand new air shaft as well, you're going to want to put a little bit of grease on the actual air shaft, just a little bit, and I just rub mine in because there's a little seal on there that you can see on there. that should move nice and smoothly on there, and that's normally not lubricated straight out of the factory. Okay, so once we got that on there, I'm just going to put one tiny little bit of grease on the top of this seal head here. That's literally all the grease you need. When you take these things out of your forks, you'll see them packed with grease, and that's not nice. It just doesn't work properly. So what we're going to do is, like I said, obviously we're doing this now. I've recently serviced the fork, so I'm not doing a full service on it. But what at this point, I'll just shove my air shaft back in there, and then the red cap pops in the bottom like that. You'll hear it click. It'll actually not go any further. There'll be a point where it doesn't actually go any further. So at that point, like that, you hear it just clip. That's where we want to put our circlip ring back into place. Hopefully this goes on a bit easier than it did to take it off. Cool, so that's on. Now what I normally do with that is, once I've installed the circlip ring at the bottom, to make sure it's seated properly, I'll take my pick and I'll just move the actual circlip around. If you can see it glide around on the inside, it's been inserted correctly. Cool, so there's our new 160mm air shaft installed. And basically we can get back to putting the fork back. Now that we've got this all back together again, I've just normally you would replace your foam rings. It's a good idea to do this. So before you, unless your fork is absolutely brand new, get yourself a lower leg service kit that will come with foam rings and also the crush washers for the fork as well at the bottom. But I'm going to reuse these ones because I haven't really got much run time on them. So what I'm going to do is that where I've pulled those out from inside there, I'm going to reinsert them. Now there's sort of two thought processes, or schools of like how you install these foam rings. Some people like to soak them before they put them in. Personally, with me, I don't like doing that because it just makes it really difficult to get them in there. Now, just make sure that the foam ring actually sits flush on the inside. Now, it's a lot easier to do, like I said, when they're dry because you don't get oil all over the place and you're not trying to save the oil from going into the lower legs as well. So we just pop those in there like that. And then I'll just run my finger around the edge of the foam ring to flatten it out on the inside. Great, so our foam rings are now in place. And obviously the lower legs obviously ready to come back onto the fork itself. So before we do that, you want to get our 0W30 oil. And I take a little bit in a syringe. This isn't an exact measurement now. This is just to lubricate the foam rings. So on the inside, what I'll do is I'll actually just start injecting it around, right around the foam ring there. And it should absorb it if it's a brand new foam ring. So we'll just put some all around there. So that one's nicely lubricated. Let's get some more. Now it's important that your foam rings actually do stay moist, and the reason for that is obviously it reduces the amount of friction on the fork itself, and then it'll give you a nice and compliant ride. Cool. Don't worry too much if there's a bit of oil coming out of the lows. That's where it's obviously had a runoff on there. So reinstalling the lower legs on there, you just want to slide it up. Now this is probably one of the trickiest parts of this whole lower leg installation on here, is making sure you don't pinch your wiper seals. So these wiper seals on either side here sometimes get pinched when you're reinstalling them, so just take your time when you're putting them on there. Just want to put it so that it's sort of cool. That one looks pretty good. It's not pinched anywhere around the actual wiper seal itself. And what you want to do is just slide your lowers back on to your bicycle. Now at this point we're almost done. This is probably one of the more important parts that you need to obviously take a note of, and I've seen some RockShox forks actually come out of the factory with no oil in there, which I actually serviced one of my friend's forks. The lower leg oil is important because it keeps everything lubricated as the suspension cycles through its travel. So this is obviously pertaining to the RockShox Yari, but each and every RockShox fork has its own specific oil weight, as well as the volume of oil which is installed into the lower legs as well. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to rotate the bicycle upwards. Now again, you know, you can kind of do this. I'm actually going to lower the bike stand down because it's going to make our lives a lot easier. Let's just put that down like that. I'm going to rotate this. Now doing this service, it does help doing this off the bicycle. So to actually taking your fork off of the bicycle, I've done this quite a few times now, so I'm not really too worried about it. Now what we need to do is we need to ensure that we're getting the correct amount of oil into both the lower leg or the air side and also the damper side. So I believe off the top of my head, I'll just need to confer. Okay, so just had a quick double check. We need 10 milliliters of 0W30 on both on the damper side and on the air spring side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull 10 milliliters out of here. These oil volume weights are important. They can change the characteristics of your actual fork and the way it behaves. So obviously just put the recommended amount of oil inside the damper, and also stick with the recommended oil weight as well, obviously for the lubrication of the fork. So when you do this, make sure that the shaft itself is pulled away so that you're not injecting into the shaft. So you can see the shaft there and there. So as I pull that away, it'll pop away from there. This is where you need to inject it. So now, obviously I'm not at a perfect angle, but this should be fine. It's 10 milliliters in the air spring side. and 10 milliliters in the damper side. Now, at this point, we want to also ensure that we install new crush washers on the bottom. That's obviously the retainers that go on the fork itself. So you'll see normally the crush washers at the bottom of your parts. You see the little black part here? That was a crush washer, and then there's one just there as well, on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install new ones off camera, because these are a little tricky to get on and off, and then we'll come back to you in a second. Okay, so now we're back. We're going to just push the fork so that the lowers, the damper lowers and the air spring lower, or connects with the lowers of the fork. We just want to screw that in. Cool. And now we just need to make sure that these are tightened up. The torque specifications on these things will be on the SRAM website. I'm not going to torque these up just yet, but they are, I believe, around about 7 Newton meters, so not overly tight. Cool. Once you've got those on, obviously make sure that you've installed your parts back on. What you can use is a little bit of disc brake cleaner and just clean off the excess oil around the lower legs around here. And the reason for that is obviously right here is your disc brake rotor. You don't want to get any oil contaminating your rotor at that point. So just giving that wipe down the tissue with isopropyl alcohol. And we can lower our bike back down to stand out or into the normal position. Now, because this fork was running 180mm air spring on there, I basically was only running one volume token on there. And what I'm going to show you guys how to do as well is how to actually change your bottomless tokens on your air spring. So this is so important. You can use a spanner to do this, but you need to use basically a chamferless socket, so one that doesn't have little ridges in the inside of it, just so that it gets nice good grip on the top cap of the air spring. Okay, so we want, this is the top cap on the Yari is 24mm, so we want to put that on there. Just give it a bit of a crack. Once I've got the actual air cap loose, I'll just pop this off. Down screws. There's 2 volume tokens in there. So basically what you want to do is, these little grey things are your bottomless tokens. Now, for a super plush suspension, you want to use less volume tokens. You'll go through more travel. But obviously, because this bike isn't a very big travel bike, this is only 135mm travel or 130mm travel at the rear, I'm actually going to set this up so it's a little bit more poppier. So with this, again, consult with the SRAM website. This will ensure that you don't exceed the recommended maximum volume tokens for your air, on the air spring side. So it's air shaft dependent. Normally on the lower air shafts, it will have more tokens in there, obviously to make it more progressive and stop it from bottoming out very easily. And on the longer ones, you normally have less bottom tokens. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one more bottomless token to this 160mm. So these all screw together, by the way, so just make sure that screws on there like that. You can tighten these up. I think it's 8mm Allen key at the top of those, but I'm already too fast. That's quite tight as it is. Now, obviously it's all good practice to all your seals on your bicycle to put re-lubricate them. I had enough lube on that actual seal on there, so I'm not going to put any more on there. Just make sure that this is nice and tight on there. So let me just do that back up again. And that's as easy as it is to change your air spring. So what your air spring, your air spring's not really difficult to change. And then obviously it depends. So if you're using a fork on multiple different bikes, or you've got a fork which you want to use on a bike that's got less travel, the Yaris go from 120mm up to 180mm, and that's just dependent on the air spring that you actually use inside them. So the final step, obviously, on our journey here is we want to reinstall our valve core that we took out of the air spring. Now what I normally do is I'll pump it back up to the desired pressure. Now on purpose I didn't actually take the original air pressure when it was running at 180mm. And the reason for that is that at 160mm travel you've got less travel, so your sag may be slightly different on the bike. And also the progressivity of the fork, depending on how you want to have it set up. You may want it slightly firmer at 160. So I haven't actually I didn't take the original air volume, but if you are just doing a lower leg service on your bicycle, it's a good idea to actually, before removing the air from your air chamber, is to take the air pressure so that you know offhand you don't have to reset the sag. You just pump it up to the pressure that you need. Cool. So the last bit of our journey is obviously putting air back into the fork. What I normally do with this is I'll pump them up in 50 psi increments, and then I'll cycle the fork. But obviously, because this is in the stand, I'm just going to pump this up. Okay. Now, what you'll probably need to do, I'm not going to do this on camera, but once you cycle the suspension, so you've got your front wheel in there, you cycle the suspension so the suspension comes back up again, you'll probably need to check your air pressure again to just check that where the air volumes have balanced themselves out, and then top up again to check your sag. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it was a bit of a to and fro video. I just wanted to put some content out there, and especially doing the small service, doing the complicated servicing like this, which is actually relatively easy for everyone, and especially during these times of COVID and people are in lockdown and bike shops are not open, things like that, we're not able to get out and about. It's simple enough to do yourself at home with just some basic tools. I think the most advanced tool that you need here is a circlip plier, and then obviously if you're changing the bottomless tokens on here, 24mm socket. Other than that, most of the stuff you can pick up at your local health foods or hardware store. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. And just if you do like this video, like it, and subscribe to my channel as well. Thank you.